Hello and welcome to Press TV's special rolling coverage of the day known here as in Iran as the National Day of Resistance against the global arrogance. Today, thousands have gathered outside the building of the former U.S. Embassy here in Tehran on the 32nd anniversary of the U.S. Embassy takeover. The anniversary is known as the National Day of Resistance against the global arrogance and also as Students' Day. Iranians mark this day with public rallies voicing support for the ideals of the Islamic Revolution. Mr. Joshua Blakeney is a staff writer of Weapons Today, joining us from Canada, Calgary, and of course, speaking with him here is going to give us a better view of how the Western world is looking at this, as he has been part of that. Joshua, thanks so much for being with us. Speaking about the student side of the story, we heard Professor Izadi and Dr. Marandi giving their views here. And of course, that's been repeated a lot here in Tehran when the students who carried out that takeover and later wrote about it or talked about it have been repeating and saying the intentions that they had and the conditions of the time when that incident happened. So tell us, is the story, the way that the students say it, something that the Western world has become familiar with?
No, I think that in Western history books, they tend to efface any historical events which are inconvenient to the prevailing orthodoxy, the imperial orthodoxy. Of course, we're encouraged in universities in the West to view those in the Middle East as kind of, savages, as unable to be responsible enough to control their own destiny, control their own wealth. And what the Iranian Revolution has done is assert independence, offer a beacon of light for those who are interested in decolonizing their countries. Of course, for the last 500 years...
Okay, Mr. Blakeney, if I could just jump in here, if I may, because I'm just hearing that the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Mr. Saeed Jalili, is delivering a keynote speech there. So first we'll take a listen to that speech before we continue the discussion.
Assalamu alaikum, ya
wars abroad and also the capitalist policies at home. I'd like to go back to Joshua Blakeney, staff writer for Weapons Today, who was with us earlier from Calgary in Canada. Joshua, if you can hear me, let's have your view on what Iran has just said, the accusations just raised by Iran and those the evidence that Iran said cannot be denied and is reliable and has now been presented to the UN. First of all, tell us what you think this rather announcement by Iran means at this critical juncture, and when America is facing these problems at home, as Dr. Marandi was saying there, do you think that this time round the world media, the world public opinion is going to take a more serious stance on this?
I believe so, and of course we're all very grateful that Iran has been illuminating for the world the U.S. government and the Israeli government's complicity in international terrorism. Of course, the Iranian hostage situation where the courageous students rose up against the hegemony that the good professor refers to was actually one of the stimuli was the Iranian provincial government meeting with Zbigniew Brzezinski in Algiers a few days before the hostage crisis. Now, Zbigniew Brzezinski, a prominent U.S. empire builder, U.S. imperialist, was the architect of the Mujahideen, who we are told morphed into Al-Qaeda. And so, indeed, this is connected in many ways to the U.S. embassy situation that we're eulogizing and remembering today. The actions of the students in Iran in 1979 serves as an example for global students who want to know how to resist colonization both domestically and abroad. And the Iranian Revolution is symbolic for the world as a beacon of independence from the U.S. and the Israeli imperial agenda of controlling the Middle East. In the case of the Israelis, they very much enjoy terrorism because terrorism allows sectarianism and civil war in the Middle East. Indeed, many people missed during the Egyptian uprising that there was explosions going off in the Coptic churches. Now, the Egyptian Lawyers Guild came out and alleged that was Mossad blowing up Coptic churches in Egypt in order to create civil war. So the people of the Middle East, rather than unifying to resist imperialism, resist the despoliation of their lands and resources. But I think that the imperialists are very keen to fragment the Middle East the Islamic Revolution offers a potential unification for the broader Middle East, and it's unprecedented in history. And so I believe this evidence that's coming out of U.S. complicity in terrorism yet again is quite significant. I'm doing my MA thesis on the events of 9/11 here in Canada, and I can tell you it seems to be the case that the U.S. and the Israeli government killed 3,000 citizens on 9/11 after controlling various cells. Wayne Madsen, a former NSA worker, released documents suggesting that the Israeli Mossad controlled all of those patsies who we saw at the airports on 9/11. And indeed, Mohammed Atta, according to his girlfriend, spoke Hebrew, which indicates that these terrorists are often the antithesis of Islamism, which, of course, is peaceful and promotes causes of justice. The speech we saw by Mr. Jalidi, he exhibited more moral rectitude than all Western leaders I've ever seen put together. He illuminated the most germane issues of our time and showed a historical awareness that we don't often see from Western politicians. He linked the decolonization struggles of the people of the Middle East to those of the Native Americans, for example, that the U.S. massacred in their droves over the centuries since its secession from British North America in the 18th century. This is a significant speech which offers inspiration for those who want to liberate themselves, not only in the Middle East, but indeed in the U.S. too.
Okay, thank you very much. Do stay with us, Joshua, but let's get back to Mr. Izzadi on the points you just raised there. Some significant points, interesting issues raised there by Joshua. Dr. Izzadi, if you were listening, when he does say that what happened in Iran in 1979 has a lot to say and the world can still learn a lot from it, it could even be used as when we are speaking historically of an example in history of what can be done by students, by a nation who want to stand against U.S. imperialism, who want to gain their independence. Well, maybe a lot of people would ask, well, if you ask those same students now that were involved in that takeover, if they'd do something like that again, a lot of them may say no, they won't do it at this juncture in time, but that the situation there was different and they had no other chance, no other opportunity then but to do that. Do you think that by that takeover, anything, if anything, was achieved, what was achieved rather by that takeover, that those students can now say was worthwhile?
Yes, I think what was achieved was presenting this fact that the U.S. Hegemony, the U.S. Rule is breakable. And if the people of a nation decide to be free and independent, no one, including the U.S. government, can stop them. And the fact that a number of students took over the U.S. Embassy and that resulted in leaving of Americans from Iran and basically Iran gaining its independence once again shows that the people power is more important and more powerful than the governments, whether it's in Iran or anywhere else. And what is happening, I think, is that if you look at the social movements, the independence movements of the last 70, 80 years, you see that more or less all of them say the same thing. The new language of the day, the 99%, opposing the 1%, is basically what happened with the independence movement after World War II, what happened with the Islamic Revolution, what is happening in the streets of New York and Oakland today. The people wanting to make sure that their voice is heard, the people wanting to make sure that their government is not corrupt, the people wanting to make sure that their government is independent from influence, whether influence of the 1% that is rich or the influence of the 1% that is rich and it's outside the country. Overall, I think all of them, whether you look at the people in Iran or you look at the people in the States or you look at the people in Egypt and Tunisia and Bahrain and Yemen and elsewhere, basically say the same thing, that they no longer want to tolerate the greed and corruption of the 1%. And that is what is happening in Tehran today. Basically, restating this. What is different with the Iranian government is that since the government has been brought about by a popular revolution, the government officials say the same thing because they are part of the people. In some other governments, we don't see the same thing because we haven't had revolutions in those governments. If the people in the United States succeed in changing the nature of their government, then you will see American officials would say the same thing. And this is, I think, where the world is going to.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Izadi, with his comments there here in Tehran for us. We're running out of time. We're going to go to our international headlines, but before we do that, let's just get the latest now from our correspondent Ghambar Naderi in the streets of Tehran. Ghambar, before we end this part of the program, tell us of the events that have been planned up until now and what's going to take place from now on in this National Day for Iranians.
Well, as you can see, the event is almost over, but not for the demonstrators, because they are now heading towards the Tehran's university, where the Friday prayers are going to be held later today. And with what I have seen, the experience that I had today was extremely fresh and moving, because people were here with open eyes, and also they were excited to see foreign guests from Turkey, from Iraq, from Bahrain, from Syria, and other places in the Middle East. And so, I mean, it gives them a lot of hope to continue their resistance and their struggle towards independence from the arrogant powers. And what I can see, every person has his own experience here. I can talk about my own experience, that I'm really happy. I'm really happy that this thing is still as fresh as what it was 32 years ago. Not because this is not just about, you know, marking the day. This is not just a national day, national event. It's about finding your right path towards future, and people have found it. 32 years of a struggle towards independence is a long way. And the Egyptians, they talked to me. They said that we hope that we will have your stamina, we will have your capacities and the means to continue this righteous path that you have started 32 years ago. And hopefully, and I wish them luck, I really wish them luck, because it's a good feeling to stand on your own feet and not on other regimes.
Thank you very much, Ghambar Naderi, our correspondent in Tehran there. A big thank you as well to Professor Fouad Izadi, university professor, who was joining us with his comments here in Tehran, Dr. Mohammad Marandi in Beirut, and also Joshua Blakeney, staff writer for Veterans Today, joining us on the line from Calgary, Canada. We've run out of time for now, but do stay with us. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes with the international headlines. Thanks so much for being with us.